Hello everybody, my name is Chris Whitman. I'm a technical advisor with Emergency Response Assistance Canada. I'm here with one of our members from EcoPro, who is also a RMA with us, as well as part of our operations committee. And I'll turn it over to him to introduce himself, and we will go forth with our presentation.
I'm Rob Barrow, president of EcoPro. I've been a gasser for 25 years, journeyman Class A, and an RMA for 4 years. And Chris and I will do this training video with the liquid transfer valves.
Excellent. So the intent of the video here is to show how these liquid transfer valves work. What we're going to show today is actually what a liquid withdrawal valve looks like on the top of a stationary tank behind us here. Behind the stationary tanks, we actually have a bobtail, which also has the same fitting that's underneath the barrel, and we're going to show you that later on in the video. So what you see here is two different setups. What I have, I guess on the right side of the screen for you, is what we have is we have a 90-degree angle, 3/4 inch liquid withdrawal valve. And then of course we have two different styles of adapters. Essentially the adapters are the same thing. One is for Marshall, one is for Rego. Both of the adapters, the actual withdrawal valves on the tanks, typically will have a cap. On top of the cap, this is what you're going to see. With the Marshall version, it actually tells you the exact adapter that you should use for it. The key thing with these adapters is that when you see them on a stationary tank or on a bobtail, as you start to screw this off, you screw it off slowly. This thing actually has a weep hole that's built into it. The idea here is that if you start spinning this cap off and you actually get a lot of liquid coming out of there, then don't take the rest of the cap off. Screw it back on, and we're gonna have to come up with another way of getting liquid out of the tank because there's something wrong with the check lock system inside the valve itself. Same thing that you would do with the rail car situation with some of their valves. The Rego valve, which is similar to the one that we're going to actually see on the stationary tank shortly here, looks exactly like this. It has the exact same setup. Basically, you want to make sure you take your wrench on here. You're going to start screwing the cap. The main thing when you start taking off the caps is make sure you don't unscrew the valve with it. So put a wrench on here, unscrew the cap, again, slowly. If you get any sort of significant leak that does not go away, because you might have some vapor that's in there, then screw the cap back on and again, go back to the same setup. We're gonna have to come up with a different solution. So, the way these adapters work, after you get the cap off, get the cap off, you're going to have something that looks like that. Inside this adapter here that's on the bulk truck, or on the bobtail, sorry, there's two different springs. There's an internal spring that moves the stem, and then there's the actual excess flow check lock that is the larger piece on this particular one. So the intent of the instructions is take your liquid withdrawal valve, of course using Teflon tape, and secure it on there so we don't have any leaks. You're going to take your adapter, you're going to actually push it on your withdrawal valve. There's a little bit of an O-ring on there, and you leave this valve in the open position. So when the valve is in the open position, you start screwing your adapter onto the valve. And what this does is it actually pushes the stem inside the check lock valve open. So what you're going to expect in this case here, and I'll try to show you from the video here, you're going to actually get a discharge of liquid that should come out of this valve. They immediately say to close the valve. At this point, what happens is the pressure will equalize inside your adapter and your valve. Then you should actually hear a click. The click is basically the check lock opening up, because there's a spring in here that's going to overcome with the differential pressure when they equalize. And that should set you up for getting liquid out of your tank. All right, the one last piece that we kind of want to talk a little bit about, although it's not technically going to be used so much on a bobtail rollover, is this vapor I guess style of valve. Typically it's installed on the fill valve on a stationary tank or cylinder, where you have a valve that looks like that. Basically how they fill it, they pull the cap off, they put their fill valve from the truck, the bulk truck, onto this. It basically pushes down the stem and they spray fill essentially the tank. So what happens when we have to withdraw or evac one of the stationary tanks is we actually have to install an adapter because of that check valve. This adapter actually has a stem that screws in and out and actually pushes on that check lock. So with this particular valve here, what you have to do is you have to actually install it with the valve fully in the open position. You screw it onto your vapor fill valve, and then as you basically almost close the valve or push the stem down, you can see here that the part of the valve here opens up, and that's what's going to allow you to get vapor out of your tank. Or in the case of evacing, we're going to be pushing pressure into the tank to evac it through the liquid withdrawal valve. Now the instructions for the valve itself actually say that you should install a 3/4 inch valve between your vapor valve here and whatever you decide to connect your system to. In this case, I have a reducing coupling to go to a 2-inch size hose, since most teams seem to carry a 2-inch hose for the LPG transfer side of things. All right, everybody, one step that we want to make sure that we really talk a little bit about is the PPE that you're going to have to use when we deal with the LPG liquid side particularly. The one thing that we want to have is some form of neoprene glove. Because we're dealing with liquid, we don't want anything to soak through our glove and cause either a frostbite, frost nip, and cause some sort of a medical injury to yourself. One of the suggestions that come from Rob here is underneath these neoprene gloves, not a bad idea to put some form of a light insulated gloves on there, because when these do get covered in a little bit of liquid, which could occur, having that little bit of extra insulation is also important. Also, just to preamble into what we're going to do next here is you are going to be generating some release as we start installing these adapters. So your gas detector will pick up some LELs potentially as you're starting to do this. So barring all the standard PPE that you're going to wear during your transfer, at the addition of having these gloves with some insulation, also your position, whether you're going to be under a truck, installing an adapter, make sure you understand where the liquid is going to go if it does release. Okay, so what Rob's showing here is he's showing how to take the cap off of that liquid withdrawal check valve. And it gave a little bit of a spurt as he first initially took off the cap, which is what we wanted to show. If that was to continue, we would want you to put the cap back on and make sure that we don't take it off all the way. Also notice that Rob also put a backup wrench on the bottom of that valve as he was trying to get the cap off. The next step of this process is to install the check lock adapter with the liquid withdrawal valve installed on it. Now before we do that, we've already shown taking off the cap. I just want to show here what kind of pressure we're dealing with inside this container. So I've installed a pressure gauge on this container. And we're sitting at about 64 psi of pressure inside the tank as we speak. So now I'm going to swing back here and show Rob here, and he's going to install that adapter and liquid withdrawal valve. So the first thing he's doing here is he's actually opening up the valve as per the manufacturer's instructions, and then he's going to push it down so that the O-ring inside the check lock seats a little bit, and he's angling the angle away from himself. And now he's slowly spinning on the nut on the bottom of the adapter, and you can see here that we have a release. So this release here is actually the stem being pushed down into the tank. So now what he's doing is he's closing the valve. And you can actually hear a click where the actual check lock itself actually equalizes and it pushes down, and it allows you to get liquid out of the tank. So the next step is actually taking off the valve. Now in this circumstance here, we actually still have liquid inside this tank. So we're going to actually show how to seat the check lock inside the adapter there. Now the key thing when you do this is you need to make sure that you have at least 35 psi inside your tank. And we've shown here that we've had 64 psi. So in this case, we should expect this check lock to actually seat. So you can see there that we had a rapid release here of liquid propane, and Rob right now, he's actually opened up the valve itself, and he's going to remove the adapter. So all we saw there at the end was actually the stem, which was still pushed down because the adapter was still releasing some liquid, but it very much in a controlled state versus trying to set that check lock. So at the end of the evacuation of your tank or your bobtail, the last thing that we need to do is actually put on the actual cap itself. And again, Rob's making sure that he's got two valves, one holding the bottom and one holding the cap, to put the cap back on. Just bear with me here. I know it might be a little non-steady here, but I'm going to try to crawl underneath the bobtail itself and show you kind of where you would expect to find this liquid withdrawal valve. So in here, you can see that this manufacturer actually labeled their liquid withdrawal valve actually very, very well. This one actually looks like one of the Rego versions, and it's actually located in a quite accessible location. So it actually works out pretty good on this particular bobtail. Most often where we've seen these liquid withdrawal valves, usually they're near the back of the barrel underneath the axle, and usually it's a fairly tight fit to get in there, but that's normally where we find them. Again, this manufacturer has put it quite accessible here on this particular bobtail. So in the event that we're going to leave the valve on the means of containment, in order to be compliant with Transport Canada rules for transporting the tank at the end, we need to install a plug inside the valve after, of course, we've closed it, as a secondary closure to be compliant with the regulations. And you can see here that Rob is tightening up a 3/4 inch plug into their angle valve in order for us to be compliant.